Hello, this is Socialist Links. Welcome to my channel. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about overpopulation, or specifically the lack of the truth about overpopulation, how it does not really exist, or that it's very well, it's not. There's not actually much evidence that it basically exists under the capitalist system that we have today. There seems to be this resurgence of a trend on the ideas of overpopulation, since the early 2000s. An idea that majority of the problems that we face in today is not necessarily because of the amounts of wealth concentrated to very few, that basically ends up leaving a lot of wealth and a lot of prosperity for others outside of hand for them, or not the fact that the market is basically ineffective at actual distribution, or that there is an oversupply of commodities. No, the problem is that there's too many people around, and that there's too many people just consuming so much stuff to the point where people die and end up starving to death. And thus, basically, the solution then is either one, to genocide the population, or two, to have state control mandates on the population of the certain area of the areas around the world. And that's basically like the ideas at hand. This is the idea of overpopulation theory, and this is one of the biggest reactionary mainstream ideas that is usually just a argument to basically avoid from the problems of that the avoid to avoid the real problems of capitalism, and a lot of the actual problems that it basically faces within this idea. This idea was first originally proposed by English economist Thomas Malthus, who was a pro aristocrat and bourgeois economist that basically thought that population exceeds the actual production of goods entirely, and he's the guy that coined the idea and coined the entire original theory of overpopulation in the first place. He thought that entirely to basically solve this overpopulation problem is that there needs to be a mass genocide of the working class within society in order for the bourgeoisie, or the ruling classes that we essentially live under today, in order for them to prosper and for them to basically be able to live out their lives and be able to get an overabundance of resources at the time, for basically mostly white men, and take out the undesirables of society that are usually hoarding those goods as well. Now, most people that essentially coin the term overpopulation do not advocate for this. They would essentially try to say that there is a quick solution to overpopulation being genocide, but they do not agree that it's essentially moral, compared to Malthus. But they do say that there needs to be state-mandated population control into our society. Basically, having the state with guns, police officers, literally trying to infiltrate and trying to what's the word? Trying to create an authority over your ability to have sex and be able to breed with others at hand, which is basically not only an invasion of privacy, but is entirely destroying the freedom for someone to be able to have children as much as they want, however they desire, based off a false narrative about overpopulation. Now you might ask, why is this a false narrative? Why is this something that is bad? Why does it not seem to exist? Well, that's a great question. Now we're actually going to get to the argument. The idea of overpopulation is that resources and food is very much finite, but we have to understand the system that we live under today. It's called capitalism. One of the major things that essentially drives capitalism is the rate of profit, the ability for someone to basically produce as much commodities as possible, as a way to sell as much of them as possible to any foreign consumer that they hope will just keep on rising and rising as much as they keep on selling those commodities. And thus, when that happens, we've actually been able to collectively produce a lot more resources and produce a lot more food, water, medicine, that essentially ends up actually being wasted majority of the time due to the actual structures of the market itself. Despite the fact that we do indeed still have people starving to death. Now, is this the problem of overpopulation? Well, no. There is still enough food and water for everything to go around. In fact, 80% of produce in the world is entirely wasted. So we do understand today that there is quite a lot of food to go around. And still, indeed, 65% of land all over the planet is still unoccupied and still unoccupied. So we understand that there is also land for people to live in today. Quite a lot of land, in fact, that is mostly not lived in due to, well, the payment of private property, where people usually buy that land in order to basically try and have it be financed by investors and just letting it sit there until investments actually start rolling in, so that way they can actually make money. If that doesn't happen, then they'll probably sell that land again and then rebuy it in order to basically refinance it themselves, etc., etc. If you want to see how that basically works, you can check out my the Burr method video, where I basically talk about how this actually affects a lot of the housing crisis that not only the United States is in, but also how the world is basically structured as well in it as well. So you might be wondering, okay, so if people are basically so if people are basically trying to are already hungry and they're already starving and the problem is not overpopulation, then what would essentially be the problem? Well, if we understand that there is an abundance of commodities in order basically being produced, but nobody is actually getting them, then the problem is not necessarily overpopulation. The problem is overproduction. Overproduction is the major problem that basically faces our capitalist system today, to which it leads to many commodities being produced that could actually be used for the people themselves based on their own uses for them, and not being used because of the fact that the market has a specific price for that commodity to where people are not able to get it, or simply that those commodities are not necessarily being sold in those specific markets because of the seller does not want to sell it to those markets for those people to basically get. And thus, because of that, many of those people that actually need a lot of the food, water, etc., end up dying. This is how 70.5 million people end up dying from starvation worldwide. This is also how 8 million people end up dying, globally, from dehydration, and 3.5 million people end up dying from vaccine treatable diseases. And this because of the fact that there is countless amounts of companies that make a lot of these entire prices for food and water either be too expensive for them to buy, or simply refuse to sell it to them, or refuse to give it out for free, because it does not fit the rate of profit necessary in order to maintain their private property. Thus, the question here is not the problem of overpopulation. The problem here is the factors of overproduction and the structures of the market entirely. And that's one thing we have to understand about capitalism and about the complete horrors of it, is that we end up actually creating heavy amounts of starvation, heavy amounts of dehydration for people around the world through the overabundance of things, through the overabundance of commodities. 20 million people today around the world today, since the start of 2010, die per year. This is something that can completely be avoided, but it's simply not. Yet we still try to basically go to communism and try to basically blame the USSR, China, Vietnam, and all the communist countries for causing 100 million deaths from 1917 and 1990. Now, is this true or not? Honestly, it is not. There's quite a lot of statistical evidence that says it's not. In fact, the population rate of both Russia and China at the time could not have amounted to that entire death entirely. But in each case. But if we assume that this is the case, if we even assume that all these deaths are true, if we understand that 20 million people have been dying per year globally since the start of 2010, capitalism has completely surpassed that entire death amount in the past 10 years. That is completely bogus, and that is completely just shows the inefficiency of the entire system at hand. This is why we need to stop blaming overpopulation for the problems of society. We need to start blaming the actual structures of the market that causes overproduction of foods, that causes the underconsumption of foods, that causes the heavy amounts of poverty for people to the point where they essentially die. There's not too many people. There's too many people not getting fed. That's the problem. There's too many people dehydrating. There's too many people starving. It's not too many people in general. It's too many people that end up starving. Yet all that starvation, all of that dehydration could all be avoided if we simply just use products based on the use value of them instead of the exchange value. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, hit the like button down below. I very much appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, then hit the like button. Then please subscribe and get these videos out here. I wanted to make a video on overpopulation because of the fact that this is something that is basically talked about quite a lot, and this is something that entirely has been even speaked about, especially in the state where I'm from in Arizona, by the governor there, Governor Ducey, basically try and justify the amounts of, Republican policies being passed as a way to basically stop overpopulation. There is biological evidence to say that overpopulation has existed in pre-capitalist societies where there wasn't an overabundance of commodities, but we aren't in that society anymore. We are completely out of it. We've essentially transcended that entire structure to where we can actually have massive amounts of industrialization for the overabundance of commodities. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, hit the like button down below. I very much appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button. I would also very much appreciate it. And yeah, share these videos with anybody that is around you, so that way my channel can basically grow out there a lot more, and so that way these ideas can also be flourishing among the world as well, and we could be able to spread class and political consciousness together, not just me as a creator, but also you as the viewer to basically share these videos. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Hope you liked it, and Socialist Links is out.